Hello, everybody. This is Senator Ron Johnson. I want to thank everybody for hanging on the line and participating in my 126th telephone town hall meeting. If you'd like to participate by asking a question, and I encourage you to do so whether you agree or disagree with me. The good news about being Senator from Wisconsin is we generally know how to disagree agreeably, and that's been the case. These conversations have always been very respectful. But if you're listening on the phone, you can press *3 at any point during the call, and you get connected to one of my staff members and put in line to ask me a question. If you're listening online, you can submit questions through the question box at the bottom of your screen, and we already have 3 of those lined up. But before I get to those, again, if you're on the phone and you want to ask a question, press *3 at any time during the call. Doesn't have to be right away, but any time, just press *3, and you'll get connected with a staff member and put in line to ask a question. This really is amazing technology. This being my 126th telephone town hall, and the previous 125, we generally dial out to about 80,000 people. That means we've made about 10 million dial outs. We've had well over 1 million people stay on the line like you are. I've answered, it's coming in on 1,700 questions. And again, today we're calling out to another 80,000 people, but that shouldn't be intimidating. We won't have 80,000 people on. But when you're on the line with me, it's just like we're on the phone call. And again, it's always been very respectful, and I would expect that to be the same thing today. So again, if you want to participate by asking a question, press *3 at any time during the call, or if you're listening online, just go to the question box at the bottom of your screen. And we might as well hop right in with an online question from Lucy from Kenosha. And Lucy asks, is there going to be a government shutdown? How can we avoid that? Well, that's a really good question, Lucy. I can't completely answer it, but I can tell you how we can avoid it. It's a bill or a bill like the one I passed as chairman of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee back in, I think, 2015, the Preventing Government Shutdown Act. We've pretty well made it a conference position to be in favor of that. When I was chairman, I had 3 bills to choose from, a Rand Paul, a Rob Portman, and a James Lankford, Maggie Hassan. I chose that one because Rob Portman actually increased spending. Senator Paul decreased spending, which I'm very partial to that, but recognize the reality situation. So the Maggie Hassan, James Lankford bill just kept spending flat. It's what we do in Wisconsin, by the way. If there's a budget impasse, we don't shut down government. We just keep spending at last year's levels. We will make another attempt to try to pass that, possibly, if necessary. So that's the best way to avoid it, is just do an automatic CR. CRs are bad. You know, you're far better having an appropriation process. But regardless who's in charge, we don't seem to be able to agree on appropriations. I think another solution would be, rather than have 12 appropriations, do a 2-year cycle. 6 appropriations a year would probably be manageable, and then you can spend the off year doing oversight on the appropriations you spent from the previous year. So that would be a common sense reform. There's been a lot of support bipartisan on that one, but they still haven't enacted that. But also to relieve everybody, the vast majority of government, even in what they call a government shutdown, doesn't shut down. Well over 90% continues on because it's viewed as essential. So Social Security checks will still be issued. You know, again, most of government stays open. I think one thing you can say, if there is a government shutdown, because it would be occurring under a Republican administration, we would try and make that as painless as possible. What happens under a Democrat administration, they try to make it as painful as possible because the press always blames Republicans for the shutdown. So again, I want to avoid it, which is why I passed out on my committee, Preventing Government Shutdown Act, which is why I'm working on a better one that's, you know, more encompassing, Preventing Government Shutdown Act. But yeah, I don't like them. It's inefficient. Real people get hurt. I want to avoid one. I'll do everything I can to avoid one. So Lucy, thanks for your online question. We'll go to, again, if you want to ask a question on the phone, press *3 at any point in time during the call, and you can get in line. But next we'll go to Stephen from Madison. He's got an online question. And Stephen asks, will the Senate still recess next month even though they haven't confirmed all of Trump's nominations? Also can't answer that one, Stephen. What I've, unfortunately, and again, if the tables were turned and Republicans were being as obstructionist as Democrat senators are being right now, we have not confirmed one of Trump's nominees by unanimous consent. That's the first time, I think, in history that's happened. I mean, we have to confirm something that got 1,000 people for administration. I think that number is way too large, maybe a couple hundred. But as a result, everybody realizes you can't go through the entire process to confirm each of those thousands. You'd never staff administration. So generally, the parties cooperate on deputy assistant secretaries, that kind of stuff, and just, unless there's some glaring problem, just go, okay, well, by unanimous consent, we'll approve that stuff. And previous administrations have been staffed at a far faster rate. Democrats have forced Republicans to go what they call run the clock, take the full time in every one of Trump's nominees. So right now there's over 130 people waiting in line just to be confirmed. I mean, just think of those individuals. They're willing to serve this nation. They put their lives on hold, and now Democrats are obstructing it. So even if we were to stay in session, run the clock, you're not going to get very many of those done, not in relationship to how many are unconfirmed. So personally, I think what the Senate ought to do is go into a full recess, so President Trump can just do recess appointments. Again, the problems with that, they're temporary, they only run a year, but that would give him an opportunity to at least staff his administration. You see how swiftly President Trump is moving. It's hard to compete against the deep state, the entrenched leftists in government, when you don't even have your political appointments in place to try and get control of these agencies. So it's unfortunate it's come to this. Again, tables were turned. The press would be screaming at Republicans for being such as obstructionists, but it's just okay if Democrats obstruct. I don't think it is okay. So, Stephen, thanks for the question. Again, if you'd like to ask a question on the phone, go to *3 at any point in time. We'll go to our next online question, and hopefully we'll have a caller for the next one. But Maria from Appleton asks, what are you working on now with your investigations committee? Have you issued any more subpoenas? Well, as I've said repeatedly, I'm like a mosquito in a nudist colony. It's a target-rich environment. I have really focused, because nobody else is focused, on the abandonment of the COVID injection injured and the vaccine injured. So that's been a real focus. We're trying to close out a lot of our investigations, but for example, the Russian collusion hoax with what the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has released, just providing more documentation reaffirming what Senator Grass and I had uncovered in our investigations. That information is now at the Justice Department looking for possible prosecution. So an awful lot of what I had been investigating is now in the hands of the Justice Department and the FBI, who have far more effective and a lot more in terms of numbers investigating capabilities that we have. But we're going to continue to investigate the corruption, the capture of our federal health agencies, because that impacts every American. Do everything we can to expose the corruption of science. We need high integrity research in science if we're going to really understand how to address chronic illnesses, that type of thing. So again, the latest subpoena I issued was really a friendly one to Cash Patel, the FBI, just reminding him it's been a year since the president's assassination attempt, and we still don't know a whole lot. I was kind of expecting a lot more out of the FBI Department of Justice on that. So it's kind of a gentle prod. If you're not willing to release a report, give us the information. We'll release a report. The American people have a right to know what happened in Butler and in West Palm Beach. So, Maria, thanks for that online question. Next, we'll go to a caller, William in Appleton. William, thanks for staying on the line. What's your question?
My question is, given the tremendous deficit that the country has, why did you, after saying that you weren't going to vote for this bill, why did you go ahead and vote for it anyway, increasing the deficit by $3 trillion?
So first of all, William, it's a very legitimate question. It's a good question. I think it can easily explain it. If you listen carefully, I was always looking for a three-step process. Provide the border funding and defense to clean up the messes left behind by the Biden administration. Then my second step would have just been to extend current tax law, which would have taken the automatic tax increase off the table. That's a price tag of $4 trillion right now. That's what caused the deficit numbers. But again, on a bipartisan basis, nobody wanted to increase Americans' taxes. I mean, Democrats could have, when they had the presidency, the House, the Senate, they could have increased taxes on anybody. They could have increased them on the wealthy. They could have punished success as much as they wanted to. They didn't do that. They left the Tax Cut and Jobs Act alone. We were facing that thing automatically expiring. Had we had the smarts back in 2017 of reducing spending to pay for permanency, we would have done that. So again, there was no way I was going to let the automatic tax increase go in effect. So that, to me, is already table stakes. And what I tried to do is use my vote to create as much leverage to bring spending down to a reasonable pre-pandemic level. And so that's why I was so vocal about it, is I was pushing and prodding my colleagues, the president, everybody. We've got to return to reasonable pre-pandemic level spending. We went from $4.4 trillion to over $7 trillion from 2019 to this year. Totally unjustified. The bottom line is, this is all we could get. We got about $1.5 trillion of additional spending reduction. Historic in nature, just we've got so much further to go. So, again, a legitimate question. I hopefully explained that. Nobody wanted to increase taxes. I certainly didn't want to do that. By the way, that score could be bogus too. You increase people's taxes, there's no guarantee you're going to get that $4 trillion that CBO is estimating. I've got a real question about the way CBO scores things anyway. But anyway, William, thanks for staying online. Good question. Next, go to Teresa in Eau Claire. Hello, Teresa. Thanks for staying online. What's your question?
Hello. I just had a question about voting for spending thousands and millions of dollars to send to Ukraine and Israel when we need that money here in Wisconsin for affordable health care, clean water, safe schools.
So, Teresa, I think it's a legitimate question. First of all, I've never voted for an authorization for use of military force. I voted against the authorization proposal in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee under Obama in the Syrian conflict. I did vote for the first, I think it was $40 billion of support for Ukraine right as the war started, because I thought it was important to send a signal to Vladimir Putin, end this. But I haven't supported any past that point in time. In terms of support for Israel, it is our primary ally in the Middle East. I think they will, over time, provide stability to the Middle East. I think take a look at the Abraham Accords. I mean, the instability within the Middle East is Iran and Iran's proxies. And I totally support President Trump's bombing of the nuclear capability. There's no way you could allow the largest state sponsor of terror the ability to become a nuclear power. And so again, the world's a messy place. It's a dangerous place. I think President Trump handled that quite effectively. But he wants to end wars. I want to end wars. And I don't. There's not a president in my lifetime that I think is probably less likely to get us into a foreign entanglement with President Trump. He's doing everything he can to extract us from those things, and I support his efforts. So, Teresa, thanks for staying online. Appreciate your question. Next, we'll go to Sharon in my hometown of Oshkosh. Sharon, thanks for staying online. What's your question?
I'm wondering why the budgeting process for the federal government isn't a zero-based method versus just adding percentages on inflation rate schedules. It seems to me that any department should be able to cut 1% or 2% from their department to get the spending down to a reasonable level.
Well, Sharon, I could not agree with you more. I would run, I think most Republican members would always run on the concept of a zero-based budget. One of the impediments is 75% of the budget is what they call mandatory spending. We don't even appropriate it. It just goes on. Now, part of the thing the Uniparty has done is they've taken what should be discretionary and transferred into what I describe as other mandatory, not Social Security, not Medicare, not even Medicaid. We spend about $1 trillion a year in other mandatory, which in my mind should really be discretionary. And they do that because then the appropriators, pat themselves on the back on how great a job they're doing restraining discretionary spending. And they're not even doing that great a job in that either. But what I proposed with my pre-pandemic spending levels, the three options, I went back to Clinton in 1998, where I actually had a budget surplus, Obama in 2014, and Trump in 2019. I left Social Security, Medicare, and interest alone, spend what you need to spend 2025, but for all other outlays, I simply increased them by population growth inflation to provide that baseline, okay? So if you do that, again, spending what you need to spend on Social Security, Medicare, and interest, 2025 levels, the budget would have been somewhere between $5.5 and $6.5 trillion versus the $7 trillion. Now, I proposed that back in January in a column I wrote for the Wall Street Journal. It did gain some traction, but as we found out, even with a Republican president, Republicans with slender, and that was our problem, with slender majorities, getting back to reasonable pre-pandemic level spending, the one big beautiful bill, was just not possible. Much to my chagrin, I wasn't happy with it. I fought harder than anybody fought to try and get more spending reduction. But again, it wasn't even a zero-based budget. It was a $5.5 to $6.5 trillion based budget. And although it did gain some traction, it was not fully embraced. But I'm still fighting for it. It's one of the things I got out of my yes vote, was being at the table in the room as we try and honor President Trump's pledge to try and balance the budget. We are a long ways from that. But Sharon, I appreciate your fiscal conservatism and appreciate you staying on the line. Next, we'll go to Steve in Kenosha. Steve, thanks for staying on the line. What's your question?
Hi, Senator Johnson. My question is, I was born and have lived all over the state of Wisconsin. I've moved away and lived elsewhere, but I've always moved back. It's because of the state that it is and all it encompasses. And, right now I feel like we're being surrounded by an increasingly radical Minnesota, a Michigan where I've lived, which is moving left, has moved left, and of course Illinois. And with the Supreme Court changeover, what can we do as a state to keep from moving in that direction? And then just secondly, would you ever consider and change your mind in terms of not running and seeking re-election?
Well, Steve, before I answer your question, I just want to encourage everybody, if they want to ask a question like Steve, press *3 to connect with one of my staff members and get put in line. What I'm hoping, Steve, is I can fix all these problems in the next 3.5 years and go home. Okay, but you never say never. We'll see what happens. But again, my preference, as it was after my second term, was to go home. But at that point, nobody was advocating for the vaccine injured. And listen, I love this country. With as big a mess as we had on our hands following COVID and 2 years of Biden administration, I couldn't turn my back on this country. So right now, as much as I'd like to be home, I'm glad I'm here fighting the good fight. So appreciate that. The way we make sure that Minnesota and Illinois or that Wisconsin doesn't go the way of radical left Minnesota and Wisconsin is we just need to vote for people who won't allow that. In our state assembly, state senate, we've got a gubernatorial race coming up. We'll have additional Supreme Court races coming up. So in the end, the voters get what they vote for. And in Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, they're getting liberal governance, which doesn't work out well. I mean, you take a look at the states that are growing. It's not California. It's not those liberal states. It's Texas. It's Florida. It's Tennessee. It's states that have responsible leaders who are controlling their budgets, who are controlling regulation, who are incentivizing businesses and entrepreneurs to start new businesses and provide good-paying jobs. I mean, it's doing the common sense thing. Most Americans, most Wisconsinites are pretty common sense. It always baffles me why some people vote, even though they're common sense themselves, vote for just some of this crazy lunatic leftism. And it is. It's crazy. Boys competing against our girls, governments forcing the girls to let these boys, these biological males, into their locker rooms, their bathrooms, their showers. It's just absurd. But that's the turn radical leftism has taken, and it's been embraced by the Democrat Party. So, again, it's about talking to your friends, family, neighbors, pointing out the lunacy that people should not vote for. But Steve, appreciate staying online. I agree with you. Next, we'll go to Martin in Milwaukee. Martin, thanks for staying online. What's your question? Hello, Martin. Hello, Martin. Well, I actually have his question written down here, and so I'll quick answer it, like an online question. Martin asked, what is my opinion on releasing the Epstein files? First of all, I don't know anything more about the Epstein files than what anybody else who's followed the story. And I wouldn't say I followed it even all that closely, but I have the exact same level of curiosity as well. I would love to have the mystery solved. I'd love to see who engaged in pedophilia so that these people can be shamed and prosecuted and never allowed to harm minors like they were able to harm them. So I would love to see people brought to justice. I just have no idea. Part of the, and of course I get accused of being conspiracy theorist here, but it is true. I mean, these files have been in the hands of, let's put it this way, a Department of Justice I didn't necessarily trust. So, I mean, what's been removed, what's been added, I mean, as years go by, just like when President Trump, I think he meant it, wanted to release all the files on JFK. I mean, first thought in my mind was, I doubt all those files exist. My guess is the real incriminating evidence against, possibly elements of the CIA. My guess is that was removed decades ago. So, do you ever get to the truth in this? I don't know. Probably the best person to answer that question is Ms. Maxwell. I don't know how to pronounce her first name. But, sounds like they're going to give her some limited immunity, and she certainly can fill in probably more details than anybody else. She was there firsthand. I don't know what happened at her trial. It didn't sound like much came out of that. I don't know what happened there either. So again, I'm as curious as anybody else. I'd love to know the answers. Don't know whether you ever will. But I will also say there's a lot more important things that we need to concentrate on as well. But Martin, I share your curiosity. Next we'll go to Ron, great name, from Waukesha. Ron, thanks for staying online. What's your question?
Yeah, my question was about recess appointments. Do we have to contact Thune to get this done?
Well, I'm sure that'll be a big topic of conversation. If you saw my tweet that I retweeted Mike Lee saying we either stay in session to do as many as we can do, or we go into a real recess, not to do these pro forma sessions, which are designed to prevent recess appointments. No, we go into full recess and let President Trump's staff's administration. That's my preference, because even if we stay in session, going through the time agreements, we're not going to even come close to confirming all the people that are sitting in line, having their lives disrupted, not staffing the administration. So at this point in time, with the obstruction Democrats have thrown out there, I say go to full recess, do recess appointments. So that's my position, and I've been pretty public about it. But Ron, thanks for staying in line. Appreciate your question. Next, go to Carrie in Beaver Dam.
I tell you, take us 2 days to cut this down. It'll take him morning or till 1 o'clock to do it. Yeah.
Okay, that must still be Ron. But now we're going to go to Carrie in Beaver Dam. Carrie, thanks for staying online. What's your question?
Hi, Senator Johnson. I had a question about the DOJ investigation into the USAID, and I was wondering if they're going to continue investigating to track all these NGOs that you guys considered fake businesses, and see if there's any kickbacks to any of the political parties or political voted people in, and take action against it.
So I would say I certainly hope there will be. I remember being at an event very early on in the administration where Pam Bondi said that Elon Musk is keeping her very busy, and I don't doubt that for a second. Part of the problem we have right now in the Department of Justice is, there are an awful lot of leftist attorneys in the department, and they just quit. So there's no way they're going to support President Trump and his agenda. There are other leftists that didn't quit that Trump had to, relieve of duty. Then you throw on top of that the effectiveness of lawfare. And I'll just use the example of Judge Trupus, a person of real integrity, highly respected lawyer and judge in Wisconsin. He represented President Trump for 30 or 60 days after the election. And again, lawyers, they represent axe murderers. And that's a respected thing to do, right? But Judge Trupus, because he represented President Trump, AG Josh Call is now criminalizing what his department approved or said was okay to the Wisconsin Election Commission in terms of the alternate slate of electors. So now they're criminalizing that Judge Trupus has spent, I think, probably over $1 million. They are trying to destroy him through lawfare. It doesn't take many examples like that. A brutal repressive regime. It probably doesn't take too many hangings, and everybody else kind of decides not to revolt, right? So that's the problem now. So we've got a huge hole in the Department of Justice, hundreds of attorneys, and they can't fill that hole because, young lawyers or somebody who wants to represent President Trump in the Department of Justice, they'd rather not have their lives destroyed. They got to pay back their student loans. They got to provide for their families. So again, the viciousness of the left, this lawfare is unbelievably effective at sabotaging the Trump administration and sabotaging efforts to get to the bottom of these things because you just don't have the investigators. So again, it's a nasty reality, Carrie, but that's how the left plays. For the left, politics is a blood sport, and they are out to win because they want power. Conservatives, we just want government off our back. It's a real political mismatch in terms of how effective one side is the other when all you want is government off your back and the other side just wants to grow government, grow its power, and are willing to do just about anything to do that. So that's kind of the current political situation. But Carrie, thanks for staying online. Appreciate your question. Let's go to Stephen in Brookfield. Stephen, thanks for staying online. What's your question?
Yes, I want to know how allowing Israel to starve 250,000 civilians to death aids the U.S. I mean, Ron Paul and Pat Buchanan have commented how this is just a blood sport and it puts bullseyes in the back of every American.
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody wants to see anybody starve in Gaza. I think that includes the Israelis who've been, I think, trying to get aid into those starving people. The problem is Hamas still has control and steals all the humanitarian relief.
Why did their government officials say that they want to starve the people, though? Ron Paul has videos of this.
Well,
Israeli government officials.
So, Stephen, I'm not aware of that. What I do know is who started this war was Hamas by butchering 1,700 people. Iran by supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. I mean, that is the evil force in the Middle East, not Israel. Israel's trying to defend itself, and war is awful and it is bloody, and that's why President Trump would like to end it, and I agree with his efforts trying to end it. But Stephen, appreciate you staying on, appreciate your perspective. Next we'll go to Ronald in West Bend. Ronald, thanks for staying on the line. What's your question?
Thank you, Senator Johnson, for allowing this question. In the campaign that Trump had to become president, he spoke with, I believe it was an ABC or one of the major networks reporter. And he was speaking about those people who came to America legally and have waited for years and years and years. I have a friend who has waited for 10 years. It's coming up this August. There are people that he knows have waited 22 years. They're here legally. They're here productively. They are here as model citizens. The person I know is a model citizen. We would love to have him as an American citizen because of how he acts and his love for America. And it's becoming a farce to them when nobody is doing anything about this. So I want to know what you are doing to encourage President Trump to hold true to his statements and I believe a promise that he made that these people would be given relief.
So first of all, Ron, appreciate your question here. In the first Trump administration, I was working with Mike Lee, Jared Kushner, and the administration on fixing our legal immigration system. Jared had a pretty good concept. President Trump actually unveiled in the Rose Garden. Took up part of my suggestion of taking 100 visas down to 6, awarding them on a metric basis. President Trump wanted to take care of the DACA kids in that. That's what he wanted to do. Unfortunately, he didn't win re-election, and even more unfortunately, President Biden did, and he threw open the borders and overwhelmed the immigration system. That damage is profound. But under Trump, because he pretty well secured the border by about April, May of 2020, took that first step, you have to have a secure border before you can have a functioning legal immigration system. So Trump had pretty well accomplished that. Unfortunately, during the Democrat presidential primaries, they all promised free health care and end deportations. And so even tail end of the Trump administration, illegal immigration started ticking up in anticipation of a Biden victory. And then you saw the explosion, millions. Nobody knows the true count, but probably north of 10 million people led in this country. It's just overwhelmed the system. So we got to get that back under control. We certainly need to do the deportation of the criminals, the violent gang members, members of transnational criminal organizations, the human sex and drug traffickers. We've got a big mess to clean up. And that mess is going to take some time before we can turn our attention. But I'm totally on board with you. I've said this publicly. I mean, I think the majority of people that got welcomed in by the Biden administration came here for the same reason our ancestors did. They understood that America is a great country, that we are a land of opportunity that they didn't have elsewhere. And they came here to work, and they're working hard, okay? I don't want to see those people deported. But in the rounding up of other criminals, ICE can't necessarily overlook those people in this country illegally as well. So you'll get some people swept up in that. So again, it's a messy process, but it's messy because of the massive mess that Biden and Democrats in Congress created by opening up our borders. So got to fix that one first. But I know President Trump's heart is in taking care of the DACA kids, and you can see what he did in terms of talking about the challenges farmers and other manufacturers and have in terms of getting workers as well. And in terms of what I've done, I sent him a pretty good article on this, saying that in Wisconsin we've got a big problem in not having enough workers. So I'll continue to press them and speak publicly in terms of what we need to do. But it starts with the recognition of the problem and who caused it, and that was Biden and the Democrats. But Ronald, thanks for staying on the line. Appreciate the question. Next we'll go to Catherine in Marathon. Catherine, thanks for staying on. And again, remind people, if you want to ask a question, press *3 at any time to connect with one of my staff. But Catherine, what's your question?
Hello, sir. It's wonderful to speak with you. My question has to do with property taxes. It's definitely a hot topic in other states, and how we can provide some relief to homeowners. On a personal level, my property taxes have risen enormously since I bought my house, and every year it's kind of a terror to open the letter and see what I'm going to be paying. Just wondering if do you foresee anything coming our way that can give us a light of hope so that we can remain in our homes, and just that's one of my big fears right now, along with all the other chaos in the world, but that's the one that's hitting me personally at home.
So, Catherine, hate to weasel out of answering your question, but property taxes is not in my portfolio here on the federal level. I'm completely sympathetic. I think Wisconsin, we need to be very careful and aware of the fact that we are a relatively high tax state. Now, with winter, that kind of stuff, there's some reasons for, things we have to do, road repair, just, de-icing and plowing, that kind of stuff would boost. But other than that, we shouldn't have that high a cost of government. So no, I think the state legislature, future governors have to be far more aware of how we can compete nationally. And that's what we're seeing. You're seeing an outflow from high tax states like New York, like California, into lower tax states that are booming, like Texas and Florida and other locations. So no, I think Wisconsin has to be aware of that. Property tax is just one of the elements. Generally, again, it's a mixture, but your local government has an awful lot to do with what your property taxes are as well. So it kind of starts there. Talk to your city councils or your town boards, your county boards, and all the way up into your state assembly and state senator, and make this appeal to them. But I'm completely sympathetic, paying a lot of property tax myself, both formally in my business, but also for my home as well. We are a high-tax state, and high-tax states are not going to be able to compete moving forward. So, Catherine, thanks for staying online. Appreciate your question. Next, go to Rebecca in Janesville. Rebecca, thanks for staying on. What's your question?
How do you plan to ensure the long-term solvency of Social Security programs while protecting benefits for current and future retirees?
try and control other spending in the federal government, which is what I've been fighting for since I got here. Unfortunately, this is a Republican leader is quoted saying this, show me a member of Congress, whoever lost the election because they spent too much money. So that unfortunately is I think a common attitude around here. Unfortunately, us fiscal conservatives, we're just outnumbered by a lot. In our own conference, but certainly I don't think there's a Democrat serving here that isn't happy to spend at the levels we're spending. So again, that's why I proposed going back to pre-pandemic level spending, which is just reasonable. A quick aside, prior to World War II, the federal government was consuming about 11.4% of our economy. During World War II, we hit a high of 41%, but we had responsible leaders back then. After that World War II, they realized, we can't keep spending at that level. Even if we love government, we're not going to spend at 41% of our economy. So they actually dropped it by 1948 down to 11.4%. This year, we're butting up against spending 24% of GDP at the federal government level. Back to 1930, we were at 3.5% before Franklin FDR's New Deal, which dramatically grew government, and of course, governments never look back. We just keep growing it. So if you want to protect Social Security, you have to reduce spending. You have to reduce the deficits. And again, you're not increasing taxes, trying to punish success is not going to work. It's going to be harmful. So again, I didn't want to increase taxes. I was all focusing on spending. And that's going to be the secret here. And as I laid out, my pre-pandemic levels of between 5.5 to 6.5 didn't touch Social Security, didn't touch Medicare. But it looked at all the other things. Just asked a simple question: Why are we spending $1.5 trillion more than what President Clinton spent in all these other areas, totally plussed up for inflation, population? Why are we doing that? So again, that's the way you look at it. That's the way a business person would look at it. I'm going to keep banging that drum. I am relentless inside a conference. I am the deficit nag of the Republicans here in Washington, D.C., and I'll continue to do that. So, Rebecca, thanks for staying online. Appreciate your question. Next, we'll go to Kelly in McFarland. Kelly, thanks for staying online. What's your question?
Hi, Senator. I wanted to ask what specifically your thoughts and what you are going to do about both the masked ICE arrests without due process, as well as the inhumane conditions in the concentration camps, because that's what they are, in our country. That is not something that belongs in the United States of America in 2025. So I'd like to know your thoughts on that.
Kelly, first of all, I support law enforcement. It's a dangerous job. It's an act of service and sacrifice. They all put their lives at risk, including ICE agents. And so in the current political climate where people on the left would love to out ICE agent and put their lives and maybe their families' lives at risk, I have no problem in them trying to protect their identity, okay? I also have no problem in trying to find, apprehend, and deport the criminals, the members of violent gangs, the members of transnational criminal organizations, the human, the drug, the sex traffickers that President Biden welcomed into this country.
That is not true.
Creating a clear and present danger to this nation. We just had an instance in Wisconsin where 2 teenage girls lost their lives because of a drunk driver who's in this country illegally. Okay?
75% of them detained are not.
So again, apparently you're not willing to face the reality situation that what President Biden and Democrats in Congress, by opening our borders, the clear and present danger, the violence, the rapes, the murders that have occurred because of that, I guess you want to overlook that. Instead, just blame law enforcement for doing their job and enforcing our laws. I support law enforcement. It's unfortunate you don't. But Kelly, appreciate you staying on the line. Next, we'll go to Claudia in La Crosse. Claudia, thanks for staying on the line. What's your question?
Hi there. I'm concerned about the changes to the Affordable Care Act program monies. For instance, my husband already pays greater than $1,000 a month for insurance and prescription coverage, and I've heard that those plans could increase 50% or more under the next
budget year.
So Claudia, it really relates back to just the basic flaw of Obamacare. The most damaging elements is the Obamacare addition to Medicaid, which has completely distorted and put at risk benefits for the disabled children who, for every dollar the state puts into Medicaid for a disabled child, the federal government kicks $1.33 in. That was the design of the program, shared responsibility, making sure that the state has enough skin in the game. For a single able-bodied working-age childless adult, the federal government kicks in $9 for every $1. So that has raised Medicaid costs by hundreds of billions of dollars, putting at risk Medicaid for the vulnerable. In terms of the other aspect, the damaging aspect of Obamacare was the individual market. So I'm assuming your husband's on that.
That's right.
What Obamacare did is it forced those individuals, about 5-6% of the American population who buy individual policies, to bear the full cost of covering pre-existing conditions. They destroyed what actually worked, the high-risk pools. We had one in Wisconsin. It wasn't perfect, a couple of tweaks, and we could have kept premiums low across the board, even for individual plans, but Obamacare destroyed those high-risk pools as well. So the solution would be to go back to high-risk pools, relieve individual policies of that cost burden. It's not continue the Affordable Care Act, which is a Orwellian name if you could ever come up with one. They're high deductible plans, they're high premiums, by subsidizing that. So my solution would be to fix it. And I've always said this. Everybody else saying repeal and replace Obamacare, I kept saying, no, let's repair the damage done by Obamacare and transition to a system that would work. Unfortunately, we're a ways from that. So, but again, it's not continuing Obamacare and just increasing the cost of the federal government to put a Band-Aid over just a hemorrhaging wound, which is really what Obamacare is right now. But Claudia, I understand the issue. I'm looking for a real solution, not just a Band-Aid, like you say, over an open wound. Next we'll go to Todd in Madison. Todd, thanks for staying on the call. What's your question? Apparently Todd is hung up, and so we're going to go to Tim in De Pere, and this will be our last question. Tim, thanks for staying online. What's your question?
Wow, I get to be the last one. First of all, I appreciate everything you do and all your energy. I want to take 5 seconds, and I want to answer the question for the person out of Eau Claire concerned about property taxes. The simple answer is elect a conservative governor next year, and that'll begin to solve your problem. My question is related to the new tax bill. And one of the things we've been doing, even since Paul Ryan, where we saw the simple postcard, is we just keep adding more complexity to the tax code. If I look at the state of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania has a very nice process, which is simply a flat tax. It's very simple. It reduces a lot of fraud, and so it saves government a lot of money because you don't need tens of thousands of agents basically reviewing, and you don't have people looking for little escape ways or ways to cheat. The current example that I have is I'm all for the no tax on tips, but yet there's so much criteria around it that it just introduces more complexity, more auditing, and more of those things. I always say is you take $1, you throw back a dime, and we're supposed to be happy. Are you in favor, and is there a plan to simplify the tax code, perhaps look at the state of Pennsylvania, the way they just have a flat tax? That'd be the first part. And then the second part is we're seeing more that government is requiring us to use ID.me as far as for verification. Is that a private company, and is that basically just another avenue where somebody's getting their pocket padded in the background? Do we really need that? Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you do.
So to not answer the last question, I don't know. We'll check into that. But in terms of the first question, yeah, I mean, that was one of the main reasons I wanted a 3-step process. So provide the funding to clean up the message, the border, the wars, then just extend current tax law. As much as I hate it, the complexity of it, just take an automatic tax increase off the table, then come back in the one big beautiful bill. And I really wanted to take time to simplify the tax code. I was all for no tax on cash tips because you can't collect anyway, so don't even try. But I was opposed to no tax on credit card tips too, but couldn't change that. I was railing internally about the complexity we were adding in the one big beautiful bill. We didn't simplify the tax code in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. We made it more complex. In that case, I was able to fight to make sure that 95% of American businesses also got a tax cut with the 5% of C Corps. That initially that was the only concept. And, it was me that basically dug my heels in and screamed and said, I'm not going to vote for this thing and they need my vote unless we make sure 95% of American businesses also get a tax cut. Now, we did it in a very convoluted and complex way, but at least got relief. So, no, I do not like the complexity of the tax code. I've been talking about simplifying and rationalizing it. Rather than use the word tax reform, I always talk about tax simplification, tax rationalization, and honestly, one of the concessions I wrangled out of voting yes for this in the end was a concerted effort on the part of the Finance Committee to truly look at tax simplification. So I am completely on board with that. I'm probably the guy leading the effort here in terms of spending reduction and also tax simplification and rationalization. Again, I'm up against Washington, D.C., and all the lobbyists who just like it as is. I mean, for every complexity of the tax code, there is a powerful constituency. So it's not an easy tax, Tim, but I guess the more I talk about it, the more publicity it gets, maybe you'll get more adherence to it and we can actually accomplish it. But again, Tim, appreciate that. I'm on your side. We're singing out the same hymnal there. But again, I want to thank everybody for hanging on the line, participating. We've got a 3-word mission statement in my Senate office: to help people. Now, there are bullet points underneath there: what's veterans benefits, Medicare, Social Security, visas, family members trapped overseas. My staff does a wonderful job taking that mission statement to heart. They do a great job. We call it casework. Best people to contact there are my state staff members, either in the Madison, Oshkosh, or Milwaukee offices. The best way to contact them is just go online, ronjohnson.senate.gov, get those phone numbers. But if you got a question, do not hesitate. If you got to help navigate yourself through the federal government, or you got an issue that the federal government is involved in, reach out. You can also call up DC. Generally, those phone calls are, letting us know where you stand on issues. We log those calls in. I get a daily report, so I understand where constituents are. But these telephone town halls also are very helpful to me to understand where people are on particular issues, what their viewpoints are, and hopefully you also understand a little bit better in terms of my rationale on how I voted for things and how I will vote. So, again, thanks for staying on. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you found it valuable. It's a true honor being a United States Senator. Everybody have a great evening. Take care.